Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this special live coverage covering the intense situation taking place in the region right now. First, we'd like to start off with some breaking news where EU foreign ministers are scheduling a video conference with their GCC counterparts to be held on Thursday morning to address the latest updates and how they can assist the region. Furthermore, we have EU offering to help some European nations evacuate their citizens from the Middle East, namely Italy, Austria, and Slovakia. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our interview with our esteemed guest, journalist Yusuf Abu Ghazala, who's here with us in the studio today. Hello, Yusuf. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Mohammed. Thank you for having me. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe in these times.
Thank you. I hope you are too. You and your family are safe and all right. Could you briefly introduce yourself and your background to the viewers at home?
Sure. So I'm a journalist and content creator at the Kuwait Times. Specifically, I run the Kuwait Times archive account, where I delve into the history of not only the Kuwait Times, but Kuwait itself. We have a beautiful treasure of an archive, almost 250,000 pages of original paper from the decades of history of Kuwait. And so I work on bringing that to life for the next generation.
I'd just like to start off with asking you a rather personal question. How has your experience been since the beginning of the situation?
It's been interesting. Obviously, with it being Ramadan, sometimes the sleep schedule can be affected by that. And I woke up a little later than usual the day the war began. And the first thing I did when checking my phone was see Trump's announcement that operations and the war had begun. And immediately upon hearing that headline, I heard the first sirens and I heard blasts. And it's a bizarre situation to feel that what you see in headlines, what you read about and hear about as political analysts theorizing and hypothesizing about what could happen is all of a sudden being heard in real life from your bedroom window. And it was a strange, not nostalgia, but a strange memory, I guess, to 2003, where I was just 5 years old. And as the coalition forces moved in from Kuwait into Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom, as Iraq fired Scud missiles into Kuwait, hearing those sirens and being terrified as a kid. And looking at it now, not as a child, but as someone who has studied politics and can understand what's going on. It's a very interesting juxtaposition that has sort of carried me through the last few days.
Do you feel that there are any similarities or differences comparing this moment to the situation that happened in 2003?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of similarities, obviously there's the fact that we are facing sirens and Kuwait is under attack. Obviously today I feel confident in saying is worse than then. Back then, thankfully, only one rocket ever hit and there were no fatalities, although unfortunately 2 people did get injured. Today there have been martyrs within the Kuwaiti military, specifically within the Kuwaiti Navy. Allah yarhamhum. Their sacrifice has gone towards protecting us. And we are seeing the severity of this situation, not just within Kuwait, but regionally. This is probably the largest regional war in terms of the quantity of countries involved, in terms of geographic scale that we've seen since I can't remember.
Would you say that this is the most unprecedented situation that has taken place in the region?
Yeah, for a lot of countries, yeah, I would say so.
There isn't anything throughout the last, let's say, 30 to 40 years that resembles the current crisis.
There have been wars, for sure.
Unfortunately,
West Asia is no stranger to conflict. But I think in terms of the geographic scale, in terms of the number of countries being affected, and in terms of potential future ramifications, we haven't seen anything quite like this.
Now, we'll address the future ramifications more deeply in our discussion, but could you briefly give us what you predict will happen in the future?
So first of all, predictions are a dangerous game, obviously, and I have studied politics for my bachelor's degree, anthropology for my master's degree, so I feel a degree of confidence, but the future is never certain, and the thoughts I'm going to express now are my own, not that of my employer, the Kuwait Times.
Yes.
What I think is going to happen is that this is going to continue for the next few weeks. That's what Donald Trump has verbalized is probably going to happen, although what Trump says and what Trump does are 2 different things often. Often they're at odds with one another. But I do think that we're looking at something that's going to be protracted, mainly because for the Iranian regime to survive, this needs to be a war of attrition. Because historically, the United States is great at rapid success, but in wars of attrition, eventually political will back home runs out. So I do think that Iran is going to try to make this prolonged activity. They've set up their military command and control structure to mirror that expectation, as well as their governmental structure. We've already seen huge losses at the highest levels of their leadership, but they are managing to continue their operations in terms of strikes within the Gulf, at Israel, and around the region, at the American forces.
Now, Yusuf, we're going to continue our interview and discussion about this momentarily, but we're going to turn to our live correspondents who are out on the field very quickly. Moving to our correspondents to hear from them the latest updates on the ground. First, we'll be joined by Sheikh Al Tamimi. Sheikh, can you hear me, and can you tell us where you are and how are things looking on your end?
Hello, Mohammed. Yes, I can hear you, and I am coming to you live from the civil defense. And while the military handles what's in the sky, the civil defense handles what is on or nearing the ground. Think of them as a civilian safety net running in parallel with the military shield. Tonight, I am here to show you the civil sides, the civil defense side of this equation. From where I'm standing tonight, civil defense is active and operational, fully operational. The situation is being constantly monitored 24/7 and real time. The teams here are not in reactive mode. They have been prepared and positioned since the start of the first wave of attacks on the 28th of February.
Now, Sheikh, how many emergency units are currently on operational readiness from what you can tell?
Mohammed, I'm not going to give you an exact number because I cannot verify, but the civil defense operates across all governorates through its monitoring in the operation center, meaning the readiness is distributed and not centralized or specifically localized. Every area in Kuwait has coverage, and that is by design and a well-rounded and a well-prepared emergency plan. Routine calls as well as extraordinary calls are also being covered here. So the civil defense is actually routinely monitoring the usual calls that they usually used to have, despite the extraordinary circumstances that we're having right now.
Thank
I
you
would like
very
to
much.
add also they as the Kuwait Fire. I would like to add that they, as the Kuwait Fire Force, are both simultaneously navigating both realities of the routine calls and the extraordinary calls. And that is just because our brave, courageous teams and men and our civil defense institutions, as well as civil institutions, are well prepared to safeguard our safety.
Thank you very much. That was Sheikh Al Tamimi at the Civil Defense Headquarters. Hopefully, we'll be hearing from her later on in our coverage. But now let's return to our special guest, Yusuf Abu Ghazala. We were speaking earlier about whether this would be a war of attrition or a rapid series of strikes. We can look back at the Vietnam War, which is a very special case for the U.S. in terms of long-term wars.
Yeah.
What parallels could you perhaps signal out?
Well, Vietnam is definitely a huge one in the zeitgeist of the United States. And there's a saying that the US always fights the next war through the scope of the previous war that they had fought. And when you look at Vietnam, it sort of sets the precedent that whereas before, with conventional wars, with Korea, with the Second World War, with the First World War, there was a kind of clear start and end. It's not a guerrilla conflict, it's not a protracted conflict, and it's one with a very clear goal, right? Defend the world from fascism, defend Korea from communism, cool. But when we move to something like Vietnam, the question in the American domestic mind started to become, why are we sending our boys to die in a jungle in Vietnam? What is the goal? And something as vague as fighting communism can only go so far, but when you're 40,000 dead American soldiers in, that starts to not hold water as much. The same became true for specifically Afghanistan, where the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 was extremely chaotic and led to the scenes at Kabul airport that we all saw. And so the parallels there are that the United States is not good at justifying politically the losses that are incurred via a long-term war where the goals are not necessarily clear. And Trump has oscillated between many different goals with this operation. It started with help is on the way to the protesters who were being brutally cracked down upon by the Iranian government. Then it turned into full-on regime change operation. Then it turned into being about Iran's nuclear program. The goals are not quite clear. Because then Marco Rubio said that it was a preemptive strike because the Israelis were going to hit first, and so the Americans had to preempt their strike in order to protect their bases. And so already you're seeing the splintering of justification that just doesn't lend itself to a long-term commitment to this conflict. And you already have Trump talking about negotiations from today. I don't think he's being very serious about them. I think he's looking for off-ramps for the future, but we are seeing the seeds put in place from now.
Now, we have heard that earlier the Russian foreign minister spoke with the Omani foreign minister talking about resolving the situation through political dialogue. There was also the UN emergency session that Russia and China called for. How do you think the UN's role will be throughout this crisis?
The UN is at a very interesting moment right now. You've got the Board of Peace, which was initially and ostensibly put in place to uphold the Gaza ceasefire. But what Trump almost wanted to do was supplant the United Nations. And so the UN really has to put its stamp in terms of, hey, we still have authority. We are the global top
organization.
dog. Yeah, the global organization for international cooperation. And so this is a moment to do that. Unfortunately, we've seen that the UN can be a little bit ineffective in terms of implementation, especially against global powers such as the United States or earlier potentially even with Ukraine. So it's going to be interesting to see where these go, and it's going to set the tone for where countries stand in terms of standing up to the United States or falling into line with the United States. And I think that's the more significant ramification of these meetings. Because what we're seeing right now is the fall away from what's called the rules-based international world order, where it's the post-World War II, hey, look, we're all agreeing to this set of rules as the universal rules we're all going to live by as nations, as states, to now what's called might makes right.
Might equals right. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And people have sort of already started making their moves. Mark Carney is a famous example of that. His speech at Davos, where he decided that middle powers should unite because, in his words, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. He's already doing a tour through Australia at the moment, then India, to sort of ally himself with other middle powers, as he calls them. So I think this is going to be really the moment, these conferences, these efforts at diplomacy are going to be the moment where people decide where to align themselves. And I hope that they do bear fruit. I really, truly do.
Now, Mr. Abu Ghazala, we'll just take a quick break to take a look with another one of our correspondents out on the field, and we'll resume our conversation. Next up, we have Mohammed Al-Awadi, who is currently at the Jabr Al-Ahmed Hospital. Hello, Mohammed, can you hear me?
Hello, Mohammed. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, I can. Mohammed, can you tell us what is the current alert level across all hospitals and emergency departments where you're at?
Well, I can tell you that the emergency and the trauma units are on high alert. They are ready to respond to any cases that may come in. The staff, the team's members are all on high alert and ready also to receive any cases that may come in. This is to ensure that patients receive the best and most effective care.
Mohammed, as for the routine patients, are healthcare services operating normally for them as well?
At the moment, Jabr Ahmed Hospital is only receiving emergency cases. This is to prioritize giving the best, most effective and care to the emergency cases that come in. Any routine visits have been postponed as of now. And of course, this is to ensure that all the resources and staff are fully focused on delivering the best care and treatment to the patients that come in.
And finally, Mohammed, do you have an idea on the guidelines issued to healthcare workers during this period of heightened tension?
Jabr Ahmed Hospital, they are here at full capacity, 100% capacity. The medical staff, the nursing staff, the administrative staff are all actively on duty to ensure smooth operations. All team members are prepared and coordinated to ensure that the process is running smoothly and effectively.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Mohammed Al-Awadi, our live correspondent on the field at the Jabr Al-Ahmed Hospital. Ladies and gentlemen, we will resume our special live coverage, but we'll be back after this momentary break.
الإدارة العامة للدفاع المدني على استعداد تام وجاهزية عالية، ونعمل وفق خطط مدروسة ومحدثة باستمرار لمواجهة أي طارئ، ونتابع مع الجهات الحكومية كل ما يخص احتياجاتها لضمان استمرار نظام سير العمل وعجلة الإنتاج وسير الحياة الطبيعية، ونقول للجميع سلامتكم أولويتنا.
منظومة الاتصالات بالكويت شغالة بكفاءة عالية ولله الحمد، والهيئة العامة للاتصالات وتقنية المعلومات مستعدة لأي طارئ لا قدر الله. وفي ظل التوترات اللي تمر فيها المنطقة فعلنا خطط الطوارئ وعززنا التعاون مع الجهات المعنية عشان نضمن استقرار الخدمات الرقمية وسرعة الاستجابة لأي مستجد. الوضع تحت المتابعة وكل الجهات المختصة على أتم الجاهزية. عسى الله يحفظ الكويت وأهلها.
تؤكد وزارة الكهرباء والماء والطاقة المتجددة بأن عمليات توليد الطاقة الكهربائية وتحلية المياه تسير وفق الخطط التشغيلية المعتادة، وتؤكد الوزارة على جاهزيتها التامة للتعامل مع أي طارئ من خلال خطط متكاملة تتضمن الإجراءات الواجب اتباعها لاستمرارية الكهرباء والماء. وتوفر لدى الوزارة كفاءات وطنية مؤهلة وعلى أعلى درجات الاستعداد لتفعيل هذه الخطط متى ما دعت الحاجة. والمخزون الاستراتيجي من المياه العذبة في البلاد في ازدياد، إلى جانب توفر مخزون من المياه الجوفية، مما يعزز قدرة المنظومة الوطنية على الصمود والتعامل مع مختلف الظروف.
قوة الإطفاء العام على استعداد تام وجاهزية للتعامل مع أي طارئ على مدار الساعة من خلال مراكزها البرية والبحرية والمطارات، ونحن نعمل وفق خطط طوارئ متكاملة بتجهيزات متطورة وكوادر مدربة على أعلى مستوى لضمان سرعة الاستجابة وكفاءة التعامل مع مختلف البلاغات سواء كانت خطرة أو بسيطة. وهذا الاستعداد والجاهزية لدينا مستمرة على مدار العام حفاظاً على سلامة الأرواح والممتلكات وتحقيق الأمن المجتمعي.
الحرس الوطني قادة وقوات دائماً على استعداد وجاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام، وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ. ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
Announcement from the Ministry of Interior. The General Department of Civil Defense will conduct a trial operation of sirens on Tuesday, November 5, 2024, at 10 a.m. across all areas of the state of Kuwait. Citizens and residents are advised to observe the following guidelines when they hear the sirens. Intermittent tone. Signals an imminent danger. Waved tone. Indicates that danger is currently occurring. Continuous tone. Signifies that danger has passed. Please remain calm, do not panic, and follow the instructions provided by civil defense authorities through official media channels. This message is brought to you by the General Department of Public Relations and Security Media at the Ministry of Interior.
في أوقات الحروب والأزمات تكثر الأخبار وتتضارب الروايات وتضيع الحقيقة، ويصير الجو مثالي لانتشار الشائعات والمعلومات المضللة. وقتها كل واحد فينا أمام خيارين، يا نكون صمام أمان أو نكون وقود للقلق والارتباك. ترى الإشاعة ما تحتاج أكثر من إرسال، لكن الوعي يحتاج وقفة وتحري ومسؤولية. عشان كذي المسؤولية الاجتماعية اليوم تبدأ من شاشة التليفون اللي بيدك تقدر تبني وعي أو تنشر فوضى. مو كل شيء نشوفه نشاركه، ولا كل شيء نقرأ نعيد نشره. خلنا نوقف شوي، نتأكد ونتأنى ونسأل من المصدر، شنو الهدف؟ مصدرنا الحقيقي هو المنصات الرسمية وجهات الدولة المختصة. والله يحفظ ديرتنا ويحفظ بلاد المسلمين من كل شر وسوء.
بتوجيهات مباشرة ومتابعة حثيثة ومتواصلة من قبل مجلس الوزراء ووزيرة الشؤون الاجتماعية الدكتورة أمثال الحويلة، سارعت وزارة الشؤون إلى وضع الخطط المسبقة التي تهدف من خلالها إلى المحافظة على مستويات المخزون الاستراتيجي من السلع المواد الغذائية والاستهلاكية، ولضمان سلاسة وسهولة تدفقها إلى الأسواق التعاونية. قامت وزارة الشؤون ممثلة بقطاع التعاون بتشكيل 6 فرق ميدانية بواقع فريق لكل محافظة، وذلك للمتابعة اليومية للتأكد من كفاية المخزون الاستراتيجي. إن هذا العمل هو ثمرة تنسيق وتخطيط مسبق مع جهات الدولة المختصة التي وضعت لضمان استدامة الأمن الغذائي في مختلف الأوقات، ودامت الكويت بحفظ الله ورعايته.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our live coverage. Before we continue, I would just like to reiterate and remind all of our viewers not to take any videos or photographs of any of the interceptions or missiles or drones you find lying around. There are legal repercussions, and we ask you all to do this for your safety and the safety of the wider community. And now we'll be rejoined via phone call to discuss the latest in food and water security with Dr. Noura Shaibi. Hello, Dr. Noura. Could you tell us, as for the restrictions surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, how would that affect food shipments and timelines?
This is a very important question because the Strait of Hormuz is often discussed in dramatic terms. Strategically, however, we need to separate symbolism from operational reality. The strait is a critical maritime corridor, particularly for energy flows. For food shipments, the impact would depend on the degree of restriction. In a full closure scenario, which historically has been threatened more than actually implemented, we would likely see shipping delays ranging from several days to a few weeks, depending on rerouting options and insurance adjustments. Freight costs would rise first. Physical shortages would come much later, even if at all. However, Kuwait's food supply chain does not rely on a single route or single origin. Over the past few years, especially after the COVID-19 disruptions, procurement strategies in Kuwait have emphasized diversification of suppliers and logistical flexibility. So cargo can be rerouted through alternative Gulf ports, overland GCC corridors, or adjusted through staggered shipments. Most importantly, Kuwait maintains strategic food reserves of essential commodities precisely to absorb temporary maritime disruptions. These reserves act as a timing buffer. In other words, a shipping delay does not immediately translate into a supermarket shortage. In practical terms, the first visible effects of strait tensions would likely be 1. Higher freight and insurance premiums, 2. Slightly longer delivery cycles, 3. Increased logistical coordination, but not immediate food insecurity. From a geopolitical standpoint, even during periods of heightened tension in the Gulf historically, commercial traffic has rarely stopped completely. Global economic interdependence creates strong incentives for keeping maritime channels functioning, even under strain. So for us, the strategic takeaway is that restrictions in the strait would create cost pressure and logistical complexity, but Kuwait's reserve system and diversified sourcing provide a cushion measured in months and not days. So preparedness in this case is about buying time. And Kuwait has structured its food security model to do exactly that.
And Dr. Noura, if supply chains were to slow down, what safeguards prevent expired or compromised products from reaching the consumers?
This is a very legitimate concern, and it speaks to the difference between availability and safety. Even if supply chains slow down, safety protocols do not slow down. In Kuwait, food imports are regulated through a multi-layered inspection system led by the Public Authority for Food and Nutrition in coordination with customs and municipal authorities. So first of all, every imported shipment undergoes document verification. This includes origin certificates, shelf life validation, and compliance with Kuwaiti standards. Products that do not meet minimum remaining shelf life requirements are rejected before entering the market. Second, there is physical inspection laboratory testing. Random and risk-based sampling is conducted at ports of entry, including rapid testing for contaminants, spoilage indicators, and labeling compliance. If there is any doubt, consignments are either held, retested, or destroyed. Third, Kuwait applies what is known internationally as a remaining shelf life rule. This means products must have a specified percentage of their shelf life remaining upon entry. So even if shipments are delayed at sea, they cannot legally be released if they fall below the threshold. Fourth, domestic market monitoring continues after goods are distributed. Inspectors conduct routine and surprise checks in warehouses, supermarkets, and distribution centers. Expired products face immediate removal and financial penalties for suppliers. In periods of geopolitical tension, these inspections are often intensified and not relaxed. Slower supply chains does not mean lower standards. In fact, the opposite is usually true. Kuwait's regulatory framework is structured to ensure that if a product cannot meet safety and shelf life requirements, it simply does not reach consumers. So the reassurance here is very clear that logistical slowdowns may affect timing, but they do not override food safety controls. Those mechanisms remain firmly in place.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noura Shaibi, for your insight and your time. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll return to our conversation with Yusuf Abu Ghazala, journalist. Could you answer this question of, well, lately there have been several announcements of circulated social media posts. How can the public distinguish between official statements and rumors as to not avoid any more misinformation?
Well, we're very fortunate here in Kuwait that we have a robust government news agency in terms of KUNA. We have the Ministry of Information. We have a lot of different government bodies that are providing news, as well as, to give a quick shout out to my employer, newspapers like the Kuwait Times, who are channeling these government sources in multiple languages, be it Arabic, English, and I'm sure other ones in other languages, to cater for the entire diverse population of Kuwait. People should maintain a close tie to these official news channels rather than the WhatsApp groups and forwarded many times messages that I'm sure many of us have gotten. I know it's tempting to go to those and to look at the sensationalized reports that could be coming out in terms of rumors, but ultimately it is fear-mongering, and it is something that will damage the national psyche rather than help it. Official news channels will always be more accurate, timely, and more informative.
Now, on this point of sensationalism, what is the danger of these sensationalized topics going around social media?
Well, first and foremost, we're talking about a mental health issue here. Already people are being woken up, kept awake by sirens, people are hearing interceptions. People are scared, very justifiably so. And so to fuel that fire with rumors just doesn't help anybody. And that does become a logistical concern down the line if, for example, things continue over time or, God forbid, get even slightly worse. The last thing that we want is a panic, which would only serve to make things more exacerbated in terms of the situation on the ground.
Now, could you describe the effectiveness of the security apparatus in Kuwait and how you believe they've responded well to the situation?
I mean, I've been quite impressed. Obviously, again, I want to acknowledge, Allah yarhamhum, the two men of the Navy who died, gave their lives to keep us here in Kuwait safe. Their sacrifice is one that we will never forget, I'm sure of that. And I think that in general, because Kuwait has been, alhamdulillah, for so long so safe, it's so easy for complacency to fall in. But the entire defensive structure from day one has been extremely effective in terms of shooting down hundreds of ballistic missiles, hundreds of drones, and again, an unprecedented attack on Kuwait. This is the most hostile action against Kuwait since the invasion in 1990, and we've risen to the occasion.
I'm interested that you brought up the invasion because we can almost see a parallel, or perhaps lack thereof, of the conflict that had taken place in Iraq versus the conflict happening now in Iran. What are the similarities and differences you think stand in this situation?
In terms of 2003 or in terms of...
in terms of the American invasion into Iraq.
Okay, so in 2003, yeah, I mean, again, that's probably that's an example of the famous forever wars that you'll hear Republicans talk about. It's what Trump got elected on: no more wars, no more forever wars, no more dumb foreign wars, he'd call it, in classic Trump fashion. And Iraq is looked at as one of the two great quagmires of the American military endeavors of the 21st century, the other being Afghanistan. And while Afghanistan has a less happy, or a much worse ending, let's call it, than Iraq, Iraq is still seen as a disaster that was built on an invasion on the case of WMDs, which turned out to be a falsehood, turned out to not be true. And the parallels there are in terms of the justifications for attack in both instances. In 2003, it was weapons of mass destruction and falsified links to Al-Qaeda following the 9/11 attacks. These were all debunked. These were never properly evidenced even before the invasion. And we're seeing the same thing in the attack against Iran, in terms of the United States offering justifications like Iran is X amount of days or X amount of weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. The Americans' own intelligence is pointing against that. And so you're seeing, again, the rhetoric doesn't match the fact. And that's a big parallel between the two. Where the cases differ is obviously Iraq was a ground invasion.
Yes.
American boots were on the ground, American tanks rolled in across a border. it was much more of a conventional type of war than what we're seeing today, where it's predominantly airstrikes. It's a very much a faceless war, let's put it. There's nobody boots on the ground. And that means that there's a lot less potential for American casualties, which is a plus for the Americans. It also means that it's a lot less likely for the regime to fall because you don't have the physical presence to remove them from power.
Now, you mentioned the regime falling. We did see that in the early few days of the attack, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed. Ali Shamkhani, the Secretary of Iran's Defense Council, Brahim Mousavi, the Chief Staff of the Iran Armed Forces, Aziz Nasrzadeh, the Minister of Defense, and Mohammad Pakpour, the Commander-in-Chief of the IRGC.
Yeah.
Do you believe that these quick, rapid strikes and deaths in the Iranian regime will have a long-term effect within the country itself?
It's a little difficult to think about long-term. I don't think it's going to necessarily, I don't think those in and of themselves are enough to lead to the fall of the regime. So Iran has worked in terms of contingencies. They have a decentralized command structure whereby certain units can operate independently based on precedent rather than waiting for orders from above. And again, the spirit of a war of attrition where they can affect longer-term casualties and economic costs on the United States and Israeli occupation. But another thing is that these assassinations, those strikes specifically were carried out by the Israeli occupation. And one thing that's important to note there is that that's a classic from their playbook. They called them decapitation strikes. Essentially, if you're trying to destroy an organization, cut off the head, the rest will come crumbling down. I think that's a little reductive. It ignores the systems that have been put in place by not just other groups that they've tried that with. For example, with Hezbollah, where they killed Nasrallah, I believe last year.
Yes.
But also especially so with Iran, where this is not just a government that's held onto power in a sophisticated way this century. It's done so for decades, since 1979. And so it's going to take a lot more than that to get rid of the regime in Iran.
Now, Mr. Abu Ghazal, we'd like to continue this conversation just a moment. We'll take a quick break. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Health has activated a comprehensive emergency response plan to ensure the protection of public health and the continuity of medical services across the country, raising the level of readiness in all hospitals and specialized medical centers. Following the escalation, the ministry confirmed that emergency departments across Kuwait were placed on full operational alert. Hospitals activated contingency plans designed for crisis situations, ensuring that emergency rooms, intensive care units, surgical teams, and trauma units were fully staffed and prepared to receive any potential casualties. Coordination mechanisms between hospitals were also reinforced to guarantee rapid response and inter-facility transfers if required, with ambulance services and emergency dispatch units operating at heightened readiness. As a result of the regional developments we're currently witnessing in the state of Kuwait, the Ministry of Health has, ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our coverage right after this momentary break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our live coverage of the intense situation taking place in the Gulf region, What you just now saw on the screen was a list of shelters around Kuwait and their respective governance. Now we'll continue our interview and discussion with Mr. Yusuf Abu Ghazaleh. As we just now spoke about the Ministry of Health, have you or anyone near to you has had any experience lately in the last few days with any health emergencies?
No, thankfully, but I have full confidence that the Ministry of Health is prepared to offer the necessary services in this time. I have a lot of friends who are doctors who have said as much, and from their side there's absolutely no panic whatsoever. It's more just readiness to rise to the occasion, which is very reassuring, especially in a time like this.
Yeah, we've noticed a lot of cooperation amongst the different government authorities and a very quick response with contingency plans in place to deal with the crisis right now.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that level of coordination and preparedness?
Well, again, it goes back to what I was saying about the defensive efforts that are going on right now. Because Kuwait, alhamdulillah, has been so safe for so much of its history, it's so easy to fall into complacency, but you see how ready they are at a moment's notice to switch from the relative safety of the Kuwait we all know and love to this extraordinary situation that we find ourselves in today. So again, it's just testament to the organization that goes on behind the scenes, and I'm very grateful for it, as I'm sure the rest of Kuwait is as well.
I'm sure they are indeed. Now, moving from local to the regional response, how would you describe the regional response among Gulf states that have been attacked by Iran?
So I think the Gulf states have done a really good job in terms of setting up a united front against the aggression that's being faced, that's being pushed against them, right? Never before has the Gulf come under attack in this way. We got a little bit close to it in the Iran-Iraq war, where especially Kuwaiti oil tankers were targeted, but in this way that Iran is bombing Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates at the same time, and Bahrain, of course, is just unprecedented. And I think we've done an extremely good job between the GCC countries, from Kuwait to Oman, in terms of setting up a united front. I think there is a little bit of surprise in terms of the general population. One of the questions I've been asked most is, why are they attacking us? Why not the American warships that sit in the Arabian Gulf? Why not the Israeli occupation? Why the defenseless states of the Gulf, who are fellow Muslims who haven't really partaken in any of the actions against Iran? And to that point, what I'll say, and this is to contextualize, not to excuse, because I don't think that there's a justification for the attacks that have happened in Kuwait and across the rest of the Arab Gulf states. What I will say is that Iran, in terms of military doctrine, relies on something called asymmetrical warfare.
Yes.
So when you look at the concept of symmetrical warfare, that's where how we understand as soldier against soldier, tank against tank, plane against plane. The World War II school of
a line of soldiers versus another line of
exactly,
soldiers.
yeah. Attack, counterattack, conventional warfare, let's call it. Asymmetrical warfare is when a military like Iran's, who is militarily outclassed by the Israeli occupation as well as the United States, who's on a whole other planet, uses its strengths to its advantage. And that's what we're actually seeing it do now. Not in the way I expected. I thought that they would do things like swarm attacks, essentially overwhelm American military assets via weight of numbers. I think they would target, for example, the aircraft carriers that sit in the Gulf right now. What they're doing instead, in my opinion, is they're putting pressure on the Gulf states to put pressure on the United States to come to the negotiating table. And so in that way, they're going for the target that is less defended, because we don't have the sophisticated militaries of the Israeli occupation or the United States, although we've seen obviously the efforts that have gone behind the scenes to destroy, shoot down the drones that are being fired at us, the missiles that are being fired at us. It's heroic. But ultimately, when you're comparing it to what the Israeli occupation has or what the United States has, this is Iran's best bet to get the Americans to the negotiating table.
So they're going to pressure the Gulf states to put pressure on the United States to sort of force them to end this conflict.
I believe so. And the way that you see that outside onto a global scale is then via the economic ramifications of what's going on right now. And that's not just with the oil industry, right? We've talked already about the Strait of Hormuz, and I appreciate what the doctor said about how our food sources are diversified. That put my heart at ease personally, because that was a question I had. But in terms of oil exports, that strait is vital for the oil exports of the region, especially going towards China. And so this doesn't just affect oil prices. And oil prices in and of themselves have global ramifications. We saw that in 1973 with the Arab oil embargo, where Arab states refused to sell oil to the United States. And that caused huge pressure for the United States government at the time. But we also see that, for example, in manufacturing. China imports a lot of their oil via the Strait of Hormuz.
It's between 40 to 80%, I forget the exact
quite
number.
On the higher end of that range, yeah. And that manufacturing relies a lot on the chemicals, the petrochemicals that come from this region via the Strait of Hormuz. And so when you look at then the manufacturing industry of China, which manufactures a huge amount of the world's goods, all of a sudden if the prices of insuring an oil tanker, if the quantity of oil becomes more scarce, therefore the price goes up, which we're already seeing, then all of a sudden the price of goods worldwide goes up. And now it's global economic pressure.
Yeah.
So that's the concept of asymmetrical warfare that we're talking about right now, where one drone, one missile, one mine in the Strait of Hormuz can be felt around the world.
The actual damage of this mine or drone or missile isn't that large, but its impact in terms of different facets of geopolitics and economy will have lasting
The explosion felt around the world. And again, none of that is to excuse it by any means, but it's to contextualize that this is the way that the Iranians are playing the game. Whereas the Americans and Israeli occupation are trying, and what we've seen them try to do, is in the first 2 days of the war, we're on day 4 right now, and we've seen the intensity of the bombardment within Iran. They're trying to create chaos, they're trying to overwhelm the Iranian air defenses, and they're trying to enact quick regime change via the decapitation that we saw on the very first day, in the very first minutes of the war. Now, that hasn't been successful so far, and the longer it goes on, the more we find ourselves again in that idea of the war of attrition, which is the Iranian ideal of how to survive. That's their historic playbook. That's how they survived the Iran-Iraq war, for example.
Now, speaking of asymmetrical warfare, we've noticed beyond just the oil that has been stopped in the Strait of Hormuz, the Jebel Ali port in Emirat was also hit. And this is a very strategic and important port. Of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of goods come through this port and into the rest of the region. We also saw that stock markets around the Gulf have been paused. We did see breaking news earlier that the UAE stock market will open on Wednesday. What economic impact do you believe will be held in the local economies and not just the global economy?
Well, I think that's going to depend a lot on how the oil industry does in the future. It depends on the fate of the Strait of Hormuz, for example. The Jebel Ali port is very significant for the Emirates and for the region. I think we are going to feel some economic ramifications, especially in the longer term, in the short to medium term, and in the longer term. But I think we will bounce back. We've dealt with this before. You know, Kuwait especially has dealt with an invasion and occupation and has bounced back, you know. And it's funny, again, in my work as an archivist, one of the most fascinating periods to look through is the time directly after liberation. And what you see, aside from a country that's relieved and also in mourning over the trauma that we've collectively experienced, over the wondering about the prisoners of war, what else you see is the hope of economic recovery. So I'm not too worried in that instance. We might have to tighten our belts a little bit, but we are resilient people and we'll get through that together.
Do you believe experiencing the invasion as Kuwait has sort of toughened up the nation and the people as well as the community as a whole?
I believe so.
To make it more resilient.
Yeah, I think for the older generation especially. I've seen it with my own family. You know, just today at the dinner table during iftar, we're talking about what it feels like to hear the siren go off, what it feels to hear an explosion above you, to feel it rattle the windows. And I remember my family who's lived through the invasion said it with a smile on their face. We've lived through it before, we've survived before. And that experience goes a long way because it's contagious, right? Calmness breeds calmness, which goes back to what we were talking about before. When people spread rumors, that's the opposite of calmness.
Now, Mr. Yusuf, thank you so much for that very reassuring answer, actually. We'll continue this conversation, but we are going to take a very short break, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned.
الإدارة العامة للدفاع المدني على استعداد تام وجاهزية عالية، ونعمل وفق خطط مدروسة ومحدثة باستمرار لمواجهة أي طارئ، ونتابع مع الجهات الحكومية كل ما يخص احتياجاتها لضمان استمرار نظام سير العمل وعجلة الإنتاج وسير الحياة الطبيعية، ونقول للجميع سلامتكم أولويتنا.
منظومة الاتصالات بالكويت شغالة بكفاءة عالية ولله الحمد، والهيئة العامة للاتصالات وتقنية المعلومات مستعدة لأي طارئ لا قدر الله. وفي ظل التوترات اللي تمر فيها المنطقة فعلنا خطط الطوارئ وعززنا التعاون مع الجهات المعنية عشان نضمن استقرار الخدمات الرقمية وسرعة الاستجابة لأي مستجد. الوضع تحت المتابعة وكل الجهات المختصة على أتم الجاهزية. عسى الله يحفظ الكويت وأهلها.
تؤكد وزارة الكهرباء والماء والطاقة المتجددة بأن عمليات توليد الطاقة الكهربائية وتحلية المياه تسير وفق الخطط التشغيلية المعتادة، وتؤكد الوزارة على جاهزيتها التامة للتعامل مع أي طارئ من خلال خطط متكاملة تتضمن الإجراءات الواجب اتباعها لاستمرارية الكهرباء والماء. وتوفر لدى الوزارة كفاءات وطنية مؤهلة وعلى أعلى درجات الاستعداد لتفعيل هذه الخطط متى ما دعت الحاجة. والمخزون الاستراتيجي من المياه العذبة في البلاد في ازدياد، إلى جانب توفر مخزون من المياه الجوفية، مما يعزز قدرة المنظومة الوطنية على الصمود والتعامل مع مختلف الظروف.
قوة الإطفاء العام على استعداد تام وجاهزية للتعامل مع أي طارئ على مدار الساعة من خلال مراكزها البرية والبحرية والمطارات، ونحن نعمل وفق خطط طوارئ متكاملة بتجهيزات متطورة وكوادر مدربة على أعلى مستوى لضمان سرعة الاستجابة وكفاءة التعامل مع مختلف البلاغات سواء كانت خطرة أو بسيطة. وهذا الاستعداد والجاهزية لدينا مستمرة على مدار العام حفاظاً على سلامة الأرواح والممتلكات وتحقيق الأمن المجتمعي.
الحرس الوطني قاد
The Ministry of Social Affairs continues its core work of supporting cooperative societies and public utilities, ensuring that food supplies and essential goods remain stable across the country's markets. According to the ministry, the situation in all cooperative societies remains stable, with essential goods and necessities being available without any disruption to the consumers. And with the public anxious about the possible impacts from regional security developments, the ministry continues to monitor market conditions in order to prevent shortages and contribute to social confidence during uncertain periods. Earlier, the ministry statement also underscored its ongoing support for charitable organizations and initiatives promoting humanitarian values, reaffirming support for the civil society and social development efforts. Pre-existing mechanisms shown clearly in our past crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, proved to be functional, with the ministry working with cooperative networks to track consumer trends and maintain essential stock levels. The ministry's close monitoring helps maintain a quick response to shifts in demand, while keeping prices and availability under careful review. The Ministry of Social Affairs remain active in managing social services and public support programs, particularly for vulnerable groups, overseeing social welfare services, and handling citizen support programs. In fact, the Minister of Social Affairs, Family and Childhood Affairs, Dr. Amthal Al-Huwaila, announced today the activation of an instant alert service via the Unified Government e-Service application SEHL for people with hearing impairments. The service will send alerts when sirens sound in the country in the event of any danger. In a press statement, Minister Al-Huwaila said that the activation of the service comes as part of the state's commitment to ensuring the safety of all segments of the society. This was done in coordination with the Minister of State for Communications, Omar Al-Omar, the Executive Committee for the SEHL application, and in cooperation with the General Directorate of Civil Defense, ensuring that urgent warning messages reach all citizens without exception in a timely manner. She further added that this step reinforces the principle of inclusivity within the government services, emphasizing that enabling people with disabilities to receive immediate warning information is a national duty and a shared responsibility among the relevant authorities. It also falls within the state's efforts to harness digital technologies to serve humanity first. She explained that activating the service embodies the integration of roles among the relevant government agencies and reflects the commitment to providing specialized communication mechanisms that ensure the safety and the security of groups that require alternative means of alerting, especially in emergency situations. The minister affirmed that the Ministry of Public Authority for Disability Affairs will continue to support initiatives that promote social inclusion and provide a safe and fair environment for all segments of the society. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will have Laura El Anesi to shed more light on the social situation here in Kuwait. Good evening, Miss. In light of heightened regional tensions, how is the Ministry of Social Affairs ensuring uninterrupted access to the essential food supplies for Kuwaiti families in need? And what are the measures taken to follow up on these families and their safety?
Hi, this is Laura El Anesi, speaking on behalf of the Ministry of Social Affairs. So first of all, the Ministry has activated its emergency plan, deploying 6 field teams, 1 in 8 governorates across cooperative societies and supply branches. Field teams are working on the ground to make sure services continue without interruption. Families in need can apply through the charitable assistance platform, and we will be contacted directly to receive support, and all the services are functioning normally, and the situation remains fully under control.
Now, Ms. El-Ounaizy, how is the ministry coordinating with the cooperative societies to prevent any panic buying and to ensure stable food pricing?
So the ministry is coordinating closely with cooperative societies and relevant government entities. Purchase limits have been set on high demand items such as water, bread, and flour to maintain stability. All essential goods are available in enough quantities, and there is absolutely no need for stockpiling. We repeat, supplies are sufficient and food security is stable. Each cooperative society has its own storage facilities with enough strategic receivers supplied by various vendors, especially Al Matahin Company, Rotain, and gas supplied by the Tanker Company. Strategic reserves are secure and always being supplied, and there is no shortage and there is no reason for panic buying.
Could you elaborate about the contingency stockpiles regarding possible import delays?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Could you tell us more about the contingency stockpiles regarding the possible import delays within the country?
So, as I heard, and because the minister said that everything is under control, so no need to panic, and every information you don't have or you want to ask about will be released very soon, and everything is under control.
Now, for our final question, we've learned a lot from the past crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic. How have our preparedness strategies improved lately?
So the ministry was well prepared from the day one, with organized deployment and strong coordination. All systems were activated immediately to ensure smooth operations, and also digital systems were activated, including an automated control rooms and camera monitoring systems in cooperative societies and supply branches. Financial, administrative, and inventory monitoring system are fully operational between the ministry and all cooperatives. And cooperative societies operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And supply branches operate daily from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And also the services are running normally and efficiently.
Thank you very much, Ms. Laura El-Ounaizy. Now, before I let you go, are there any words of advice or guidelines you would like to share to the audience watching right now?
So we assure the public that the situation is fully under control. Essential supplies are secure and available in sufficient quantities. All measures are in place, and we kindly urge everyone to remain calm and reassured, and there is no need for panic or buying something you don't need.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Laura El-Ounaizy, for your insight, time, and words of reassurance. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back after this small break.
الإدارة العامة للدفاع المدني على استعداد تام وجاهزية عالية، ونعمل وفق خطط مدروسة ومحدثة باستمرار لمواجهة أي طارئ، ونتابع مع الجهات الحكومية كل ما يخص احتياجاتها لضمان استمرار نظام سير العمل وعجلة الإنتاج وسير الحياة الطبيعية، ونقول للجميع سلامتكم أولويتنا.
منظومة الاتصالات بالكويت شغالة بكفاءة عالية ولله الحمد، والهيئة العامة للاتصالات وتقنية المعلومات مستعدة لأي طارئ لا قدر الله. وفي ظل التوترات اللي تمر فيها المنطقة، فعلنا خطط الطوارئ وعززنا التعاون مع الجهات المعنية عشان نضمن استقرار الخدمات الرقمية وسرعة الاستجابة لأي مستجد. الوضع تحت المتابعة وكل الجهات المختصة على أتم الجاهزية. عسى الله يحفظ الكويت وأهلها.
تؤكد وزارة الكهرباء والماء والطاقة المتجددة بأن عمليات توليد الطاقة الكهربائية وتحلية المياه تسير وفق الخطط التشغيلية المعتادة، وتؤكد الوزارة على جاهزيتها التامة للتعامل مع أي طارئ من خلال خطط متكاملة تتضمن الإجراءات الواجب اتباعها لاستمرارية الكهرباء والماء. وتوفر لدى الوزارة كفاءات وطنية مؤهلة وعلى أعلى درجات الاستعداد لتفعيل هذه الخطط متى ما دعت الحاجة. والمخزون الاستراتيجي من المياه العذبة في البلاد في ازدياد، إلى جانب توفر مخزون من المياه الجوفية، مما يعزز قدرة المنظومة الوطنية على الصمود والتعامل مع مختلف الظروف.
قوة الإطفاء العام على استعداد تام وجاهزية للتعامل مع أي طارئ على مدار الساعة من خلال مراكزها البرية والبحرية والمطارات، ونحن نعمل وفق خطط طوارئ متكاملة بتجهيزات متطورة وكوادر مدربة على أعلى مستوى لضمان سرعة الاستجابة وكفاءة التعامل مع مختلف البلاغات سواء كانت خطرة أو بسيطة. وهذا الاستعداد والجاهزية لدينا مستمرة على مدار العام حفاظاً على سلامة الأرواح والممتلكات وتحقيق الأمن المجتمعي.
الحرس الوطني قادة وقوات دائماً على استعداد وجاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام، وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ. ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
Announcement from the Ministry of Interior. The General Department of Civil Defense will conduct a trial operation of sirens on Tuesday, November 5, 2024, at 10 a.m. across all areas of the state of Kuwait. Citizens and residents are advised to observe the following guidelines when they hear the sirens. Intermittent tone. Signals an imminent danger. Waved tone. Indicates that danger is currently occurring. Continuous tone. Signifies that danger has passed. Please remain calm, do not panic, and follow the instructions provided by civil defense authorities through official media channels. This message is brought to you by the General Department of Public Relations and Security Media at the Ministry of Interior.
في أوقات الحروب والأزمات تكثر الأخبار وتتضارب الروايات وتضيع الحقيقة، ويصير الجو مثالي لانتشار الشائعات والمعلومات المضللة. وقتها كل واحد فينا أمام خيارين، يا نكون صمام أمان أو نكون وقود للقلق والارتباك. ترى الإشاعة ما تحتاج أكثر من إرسال، لكن الوعي يحتاج وقفة وتحري ومسؤولية. عشان كذي المسؤولية الاجتماعية اليوم تبدأ من شاشة التليفون اللي بيدك تقدر تبني وعي أو تنشر فوضى. مو كل شيء نشوفه نشاركه، ولا كل شيء نقرأ نعيد نشره. خلنا نوقف شوي، نتأكد ونتأنى ونسأل من المصدر، شنو الهدف؟ مصدرنا الحقيقي هو المنصات الرسمية وجهات الدولة المختصة. والله يحفظ ديرتنا ويحفظ بلاد المسلمين من كل شر وسوء.
بتوجيهات مباشرة ومتابعة حثيثة ومتواصلة من قبل مجلس الوزراء ووزيرة الشؤون الاجتماعية الدكتورة أمثال الحويلة، سارعت وزارة الشؤون إلى وضع الخطط المسبقة التي تهدف من خلالها إلى المحافظة على مستويات المخزون الاستراتيجي من السلع المواد الغذائية والاستهلاكية، ولضمان سلاسة وسهولة تدفقها إلى الأسواق التعاونية. قامت وزارة الشؤون ممثلة بقطاع التعاون بتشكيل 6 فرق ميدانية بواقع فريق لكل محافظة، وذلك للمتابعة اليومية للتأكد من كفاية المخزون الاستراتيجي. إن هذا العمل هو ثمرة تنسيق وتخطيط مسبق مع جهات الدولة المختصة التي وضعت لضمان استدامة الأمن الغذائي في مختلف الأوقات، ودامت الكويت بحفظ الله ورعايته.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our live coverage of the ongoing tensions within the region. As we just heard from our guest, Laura El-Anezi, she urged all of our listeners and audience not to panic buy. The ministry has contingency plans in place to ensure that there is a sufficient stockpile of food, water, and other essential needs within every cooperative market. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our live correspondent, Mohammed Al-Sawaq. Hello, Mohammed. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Mohammed Jasmi.
Now, Mr. Sawaq, can you tell us where you are and what are the latest updates happening there?
Well, thank you, Mohammed, and thanks to our colleagues Sheikha Tamimi and Mohammed Al-Awadi. I'm here at the emergency operation room in Al Siddiq Co-op for the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. As you can see behind me, there are lots of screens to monitor the market and reassure that the price doesn't go up. You can see behind me the stocks and the market are full. There is no need to worry. This is the message from the officials. And I'm here with advisor Abdullah Al-Harbi, a commercial inspector. And let's see what he can tell us.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we appreciate your efforts in coming and allowing us to make the picture clear for our citizens and residents. The Ministry of Commerce has established the monitoring room in Al Siddiq area. The monitoring room as well hold the monitor of the country's strategic food reserve in coordination with the cooperative and the supply branches. The operation room has, as you can see, it has a lot of monitoring screen to monitor the activity within cooperative society and supply branches as well, ensuring a clear and up-to-date picture. Furthermore, our commercial inspection teams are present in the coordination with the operation room in Al Siddiq area in case of any food storage or any kind of missing goods or item from the supply chains or the cooperative. The operation room will be contacted directly, which the role of the operation room will contact as well the supplier itself. Our message is clear. Ministry of Commerce is directly responsible for the food security, and we assure for our citizens and residents that the country's strategic food reserves are stable. As you can see, monitoring continues around the clock to guarantee the availability of essential foods and goods.
Thank you, Advisor Abdullah. Well, Jasmi, I'm still here in the emergency operations room. As you can see behind me that now they are checking each market, and field team, they are working 24/7 to reassure that there is no shortage in any of the market.
Before we let you go, we'd like to ask you once more, are food and essential commodity stocks being assessed in real time?
Yes, I was asking the officials here, and they were telling me that they are checking each market and the storage of each market, and there is no shortage in any goods, and they are working 24/7, and I've seen that they are asking the team fields rather, to take a video and check if there are any shortage.
Now, Mohammed, for our final question, have there been any reports of panic buying or any indications of abnormal prices increasing in cooperative societies or other retail markets?
Well, that's a good point. I've been asking the officials if there was any panic buying, and they were telling me that the situations was normal, and there is no panic buying at all. It was normal, and our strategic reserve is in an excellent condition. So they were asking me to reassure for the people that the situation is perfect. No need to worry, and the only thing that reassure is that we need to get the information from the official sources.
Well, thank you very much. That was our live correspondent, Mohammed Sawag, taking a look at the precautions the state is taking. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our live coverage, but first we'll take a quick look at this following report.
The Ministry of Interior called on everyone to refrain from filming missile interceptions in the air or broadcasting and sharing such footage on social media or filming actions of relevant authorities while on duty. This, according to a ministry statement, is to avoid causing public anxiety, affecting security procedures, and contributing to the spread of inaccurate information given the current regional situation. The ministry said that any incidents or events are handled according to precise security plans and procedures under the supervision of relevant authorities to ensure the preservation of security, stability, and safety of all, especially in light of current situation and the widespread circulation of information on social media platforms. It emphasized that what is being circulated on online platforms is being monitored and tracked by relevant authorities, and that all legal measures will be taken against those who spread rumors and promote false or misleading news without leniency. The ministry urged citizens and residents to exercise caution and avoid spreading rumors, emphasizing the importance of obtaining information only from official and reliable sources to maintain public safety and uphold shared nationality responsibility.
Back, ladies and gentlemen, to our special live coverage as we continue to take a look at the latest news and updates across the state of Kuwait in light of the ongoing tensions here in the country.
الإدارة العامة للدفاع المدني على استعداد تام وجاهزية عالية، ونعمل وفق خطط مدروسة ومحدثة باستمرار لمواجهة أي طارئ، ونتابع مع الجهات الحكومية كل ما يخص احتياجاتها لضمان استمرار نظام سير العمل وعجلة الإنتاج وسير الحياة الطبيعية، ونقول للجميع سلامتكم أولويتنا.
منظومة الاتصالات بالكويت شغالة بكفاءة عالية ولله الحمد، والهيئة العامة للاتصالات وتقنية المعلومات مستعدة لأي طارئ لا قدر الله. وفي ظل التوترات اللي تمر فيها المنطقة فعلنا خطط الطوارئ وعززنا التعاون مع الجهات المعنية عشان نضمن استقرار الخدمات الرقمية وسرعة الاستجابة لأي مستجد. الوضع تحت المتابعة وكل الجهات المختصة على أتم الجاهزية. عسى الله يحفظ الكويت وأهلها.
تؤكد وزارة الكهرباء والماء والطاقة المتجددة بأن عمليات توليد الطاقة الكهربائية وتحلية المياه تسير وفق الخطط التشغيلية المعتادة، وتؤكد الوزارة على جاهزيتها التامة للتعامل مع أي طارئ من خلال خطط متكاملة تتضمن الإجراءات الواجب اتباعها لاستمرارية الكهرباء والماء. وتوفر لدى الوزارة كفاءات وطنية مؤهلة وعلى أعلى درجات الاستعداد لتفعيل هذه الخطط متى ما دعت الحاجة. والمخزون الاستراتيجي من المياه العذبة في البلاد في ازدياد، إلى جانب توفر مخزون من المياه الجوفية، مما يعزز قدرة المنظومة الوطنية على الصمود والتعامل مع مختلف الظروف.
قوة الإطفاء العام على استعداد تام وجاهزية للتعامل مع أي طارئ على مدار الساعة.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to cover the ongoing updates taking place in the state of Kuwait and taking a look at the health sector. To further assure the public, we have with us Dr. Claire Constantino, a respiratory therapist, to relate to us the latest in the health sector news. Good evening, Dr. Claire. Can you hear us?
Good evening, sir. Sorry.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And I'd just like to ask you, could you please update us on the latest developments across the health sector and to inform us of any further measures taken by the Ministry of Health in light of regional unrest?
So far, in our hospital, in the Ministry of Health, in the Mary Hospital, we have already engaged our safety precautions, especially our emergency and safety protocols, just in case that we will be needing to accept patients or casualties because of the ongoing onslaught in Kuwait or in the Middle East.
And Dr. Claire, as a expatriate or resident living in the state of Kuwait, can you relate to us your experience during this trying and difficult time?
Well, so far as a regular resident of Kuwait, there is fear in all of us. You know, this is a natural feeling for all of us. But we have to be present or have a present mind that we should know what to do as a medical practitioner and as part of the medical team. We should know what is our role and what are the things that we have to make sure that we will do in case of emergencies occurring in the state of Kuwait.
And Dr. Claire, before I let you go, I'd just like to ask you if you have any more advice or guidelines you would like to share to the viewers and audience watching tonight.
First of all, we should not panic. That is the first thing. Second of all is that we should stay calm and we should adhere to the Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Information's ongoing updates on what is happening in the state of Kuwait. And most especially, we should not disseminate any information that is not appropriate to just add to the chaos that is happening around. And most especially for our community, the Filipino community, we should be able to adhere to the call of our Philippine Embassy, most especially in the warnings of information that that will be given to the public. So we should be careful in putting any information in social media.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Claire Constantino, respiratory therapist working in the health sector in Kuwait. We would just like to wish you safety and good luck in your service to the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with our live coverage, we have some breaking news, where His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Mishal Al-Ahmed Al-Jabr Al-Sabah, may Allah bless and protect him, sent 2 cables of condolences to the families of the 2 martyrs of the military operations, the late Sergeant Walid Majid Sulaiman and Sergeant Abdulaziz Abdul Muhsin Dakhail Nasser, members of the Kuwait's Army Naval Force, following their martyrdom while performing their national duty. In the cables, His Highness expressed his sincere condolences and heartfelt sympathy for their great loss, praising with great pride their sacrifice and heroic roles in defending the beloved homeland and shedding their pure blood for its soil. His Highness prayed to Allah Almighty to have mercy on them and to grant them a place in paradise and elevate them to the ranks of martyrs and to inspire their families with patience and solace. And our sincere sympathies and condolences go to the families of these martyrs who sacrificed their life and blood to protect all of us here within the state of Kuwait. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our live coverage after this short break.
جاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام، وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة، خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ. ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
Announcement from the Ministry of Interior. The General Department of Civil Defense will conduct a trial operation of sirens on Tuesday, November 5, 2024, at 10 a.m. across all areas of the state of Kuwait. Citizens and residents are advised to observe the following guidelines when they hear the sirens. Intermittent tone. Signals an imminent danger. Waved tone. Indicates that danger is currently occurring. Continuous tone. Signifies that danger has passed. Please remain calm, do not panic, and follow the instructions provided by civil defense authorities through official media channels. This message is brought to you by the General Department of Public Relations and Security Media at the Ministry of Interior.
في أوقات الحروب والأزمات تكثر الأخبار وتتضارب الروايات وتضيع الحقيقة، ويصير الجو مثالي لانتشار الشائعات والمعلومات المضللة. وقتها كل واحد فينا أمام خيارين، يا نكون صمام أمان أو نكون وقود للقلق والارتباك. ترى الإشاعة ما تحتاج أكثر من إرسال، لكن الوعي يحتاج وقفة وتحري ومسؤولية. عشان كذي المسؤولية الاجتماعية اليوم تبدأ من شاشة التليفون اللي بيدك تقدر تبني وعي أو تنشر فوضى. مو كل شيء نشوفه نشاركه، ولا كل شيء نقرأه نعيد نشره. خلنا نوقف شوي، نتأكد ونتأنى ونسأل من المصدر، شنو الهدف؟ مصدرنا الحقيقي هو المنصات الرسمية وجهات الدولة المختصة. والله يحفظ ديرتنا ويحفظ بلاد المسلمين من كل شر وسوء.
بتوجيهات مباشرة ومتابعة حثيثة ومتواصلة من قبل مجلس الوزراء ووزيرة الشؤون الاجتماعية الدكتورة أمثال الحويلة، سارعت وزارة الشؤون إلى وضع الخطط المسبقة التي تهدف من خلالها إلى المحافظة على مستويات المخزون الاستراتيجي من السلع المواد الغذائية والاستهلاكية، ولضمان سلاسة وسهولة تدفقها إلى الأسواق التعاونية. قامت وزارة الشؤون ممثلة بقطاع التعاون بتشكيل 6 فرق ميدانية بواقع فريق لكل محافظة، وذلك للمتابعة اليومية للتأكد من كفاية المخزون الاستراتيجي. إن هذا العمل هو ثمرة تنسيق وتخطيط مسبق مع جهات الدولة المختصة التي وضعت لضمان استدامة الأمن الغذائي في مختلف الأوقات، ودامت الكويت بحفظ الله ورعايته.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And as you just saw during the break, it is important not to spread any rumors or misinformation you may find on social media. As always, get your reliable news and updates from any official sources from government authorities. And before we continue our discussion with Yusuf Abu Ghazala, the journalist joining us today in the studio, let's take a look at this report, taking a look at the efforts of the Kuwait Fire Force.
In the face of ongoing conflict, the Kuwait Fire Force has remained at the forefront of providing critical emergency services and ensuring public safety. With the escalation of hostilities, the Fire Force has been working around the clock to respond to a range of incidents, from fires caused by airstrikes to rescuing individuals from collapsed buildings and hazardous areas. The Fire Force has enhanced its preparedness by deploying additional teams to areas most affected by the conflict, including high-risk zones near critical infrastructure. Specialized units have been established to handle chemical, biological, and radiological emergencies with the necessary protective equipment and trained personnel in place. Firefighters have also been closely coordinating with medical teams, security forces, and civil defense units to ensure efficient and effective responses during emergencies. They have worked tirelessly in extremely challenging conditions, dealing with not only fires but also complex rescue operations, including trapped civilians and the evacuation of injured individuals. To better assist in the evacuation and rescue efforts, the Kuwait Fire Force has expanded its use of advanced technologies such as drones and thermal imaging systems, which help identify fire hotspots and locate survivors more effectively. These technologies have proven essential in the event of large-scale fires and collapsed buildings, where visibility and access are severely limited.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our interview and discussion with Yusuf Abu Ghazala. Mr. Yusuf, could we speak a little bit about the build-up to the attack that took place?
Absolutely. And I think build-up is a funny term because we can kind of put the goalposts wherever we want. We could start this year, we could start last year in June, but that's like starting at chapter 6 or 7 rather than chapter 1. I'd like to start at chapter 1.
Let's do that then.
Which is just over 100 years ago. You know me, I'm a history guy, so we'll keep it brief and then we'll sort of dive into a few more details as we get more and more recent. But essentially, Iran in 1925 had a monarchy, the Pahlavi dynasty. And that was in power even through World War II, where Iran was actually invaded by the UK and USSR. And this is a big example of foreign meddling in Iranian affairs, which becomes part of the psyche that we'll get into momentarily. But one thing that you see with the invasion in 1941 is the placement of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as the Shah of Iran, or the king. And so this is the person who's then in power from 1941 until 1979, when the revolution takes control. And a lot of people call it an Islamic revolution. That's a little inaccurate. Again, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, this isn't an absolute monarchy. There is some sort of shared power in the form of a prime minister. And in 1951, you see the prime minister come to power by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh.
Yes.
He's significant to this story. Why? Because he decides to nationalize Iran's oil industry. Now, nationalization was a big tool of emerging powers in that time, like Iran, like Egypt, because it was essentially taking back control of the natural resources of a country. So for them, it was the oil, specifically taking away from British-controlled companies. For an example like Egypt, you can see the reaction of colonial powers to this, because we're still in the dying days of colonialism here in the 1950s. We haven't seen the full scale of decolonization that would pass through in the 1960s, مثلا, or even into the 1970s. And so with Egypt, where that leads to is the invasion of Egypt by the Israeli occupation, as well as France and Egypt, France and UK, sorry.
Yes.
That's called the tripartite aggression in Egypt. Around the world, it's called the Suez Crisis. So you can see the very harsh reactions that states have. But in the case of Iran, how this actually looks like is a CIA-sponsored coup. And it doesn't necessarily put in a new head of state. Instead, it essentially promotes Mohammad Reza Pahlavi to being the unchallenged monarch of Iran. And essentially now his powers are completely unchecked. And the reason he was put in place in the first place in 1941 was because he was seen as more malleable to Western demands. And this is why he's maintaining his power in the 1950s. And so this is two examples, in 1941 and in 1953, of foreign meddling in Iran, which paints a picture for the revolution, because the revolution comes from a place of hardship within Iran, where people decide to rise up in the face of this essentially Western installed situation. And so the revolution itself is very multifactional. You have everything on the political spectrum from communists who are ideologically atheist to hardline Islamists. But it's the Islamic faction who ultimately takes power, which leads us to the system of government we see in Iran today. That's why people look back and call it the Islamic Revolution, because of the end result. But that doesn't paint a full picture of what it was. The reasons the Islamists won was because the power of the clergy. The clergy and theocracy within Iran was one of the few surviving schools of thought that the Shah allowed to maintain existence within Iran, and the popularity of the Ayatollah who managed to return, this is Khomeini, who managed to return from exile during the peak of the revolution to sort of lead Iran into a new phase. Now, instantly after the revolution takes hold, less than a year later, Iraq invades. This is the start of the Iran-Iraq war, which is not just brutal, but more brutal than brutal. They talk about World War I in its tactics, in its fatality numbers, in the gas attacks, but add child soldiers into the mix. This is what we're talking about here. And the United States sides with Iraq in this war. It's sending weapons, it's sending support. And this sort of paints, again, the idea of foreign meddling in a hostile way towards Iran, because we've seen it now in World War II, we've seen it in the CIA-backed coup, and we've seen it now in this war. So foundationally, the 8 years of war during the Iraqi invasion not just provide legitimacy to the Islamic Republic, but also mean that the Islamic Republic has its foundational principles on the idea of survival against external forces.
Now, this point about survival against external forces, we've noticed that in the attack that happened last year in Iran, there was an expectation, let's say, of Western powers that this would shake the core and the solidarity within the country. But if anything, we've seen the reverse effect take place.
Absolutely. And that's something in politics called rallying around the flag. See, already Iranian people who are facing repression at home, facing extreme economic hardships, largely because of the sanctions that are put in place, but extreme economic hardships, high levels of inflation, they are protesting. But when there is an external attack, what happened last year was people decided that, no, let's support the government because this is an external aggression from an enemy state. And again, that really informs the thought processes behind Iran going into the negotiations today, which is that for the longest time, for decades, since the birth of the Islamic Republic itself, there has been foreign meddling in a hostile way. And that's led to suspicion of foreign powers, particularly in terms of the West. That's Iran. That's 1/3 of the calculus that we're looking at here. And if I may, I'd like to get into some of the calculus behind the Israeli occupation, because Israel as an entity is not just a settler colony. It is. I mean, my grandparents were Nakba survivors. I still have the map to my grandfather's house in Jerusalem. But it's not just a settler colony, it's an expansionist one. What I mean by that is, from its inception, it looked to expand beyond the borders that it was allocated by the UN. And so the UN, I'm a big map nerd, so allow me for a moment. The UN created 2 maps of the partition for mandatory Palestine, that is historic Palestine. The second map was the one that went to a vote, and this allocated the Jewish state, is what it was called, roughly 53% of historic Palestine, including a lot of the coastline, including a lot of the arable land, but roughly 53%. Now, this was put to a very controversial vote in the United Nations in 1947, whereby the United States threatened or bribed a lot of countries to vote for it, and essentially it was passed. From the moment it was passed, though, the Haganah and Irgun, which were the 2 biggest Zionist militia groups, among others, immediately started pushing beyond those borders, especially around Jerusalem, with the idea of maximizing their borders. So again, foundational beliefs of Iran, survival against external hostility for Israel, for the Israeli occupation, its expansion of borders, not just expansion of borders, but essentially, and you'll hear this in many circles of political analysis, maximum number of land, minimum amount of Palestinians in it. And so, again, especially around Jerusalem, which is why if you look at a map of the massacres and ethnically cleansed villages of Palestine, you'll see a lot around Jerusalem, especially most famously Deir Yassin. And so again, foundationally, expansion is at the heart of the Israeli occupation's mantra. Now, how does that translate to more modern times? Well, if we fast forward a few years, Israel now controls roughly 70% of the West Bank, probably more if you look at it in practical terms. And roughly right now they control about 60% of Gaza. That's not the end goal. The end goal is a lot beyond that, but they have to deal with regional counterweights. What they did was they got rid of them one by one. So off of the chessboard became Egypt with their peace treaty, Jordan with their peace treaty. Now you've seen them completely diminish Hezbollah as a fighting force.
Yes.
Hamas is spent as a fighting force. The West Bank is pacified in terms of the Oslo Accords and the grinding process of an eventual maybe will they want a two-state solution. And so Israel's sort of putting all the pieces in place for the chessboard of the Middle East that they want. But what's the biggest regional counterweight now is Iran.
Yes.
Which is why they're basically the only regional actor that wants this war. The Americans don't really want this war. Which brings us to the Americans, because their goals are the most liquid and the most opaque. Because Trump is on a mission right now of personal glory, on the pursuit of personal glory. He wants to be the president that took down the Ayatollah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did, but he hasn't taken down the Islamic Republic, right?
Would you say that it had the reverse effect, taking down the Ayatollah?
I'm not sure yet. I think it's a little too early to tell. I don't think it's had the effect he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Trump is shocked that they didn't give up before it even started. I mean, Mike Huckabee said just as much before when there was still negotiations. But again, that brings us now to negotiations, which is the root of your question. These negotiations were doomed to fail from the start because Iran is negotiating with partners who aren't really interested in coming to a deal, because there was a deal on the table, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was essentially the Iran nuclear deal. That's what it was called. And it was working. There was a cessation of sanctions, there was rollback of sanctions. Mm-hmm. In exchange for every 3 months, the United States would be able to verify themselves that Iran was following through with the deal. That was working up until Trump pulled out of it in either 2017 or 2018, I forget the exact year. And up till now, just a few hours ago, Al Jazeera announced that the IAEA hadn't found any definitive evidence of an organized nuclear program within Iran. There's even a fatwa against it by the now late Ayatollah Khamenei. So again, the justifications for the war don't really seem to hold water, and it just casts doubt on the very goals of the negotiations in the first place. Were they legitimate? Were they not legitimate? That's not for me to say. But it's worth understanding where all of these actors' mindsets come in from, historically speaking, because it then goes towards their goals.
Now, Mr. Yusuf, just hold on to that point because we'll return back to our discussion, but we must first take a very short break, ladies and gentlemen. The first Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Interior, Sheikh Fahed Yusuf Saud al-Sabah, and the Minister of Defense, Sheikh Abdullah Ali Abdullah al-Sabah, met today with a number of security leaders to review the latest developments and the evolving situation on both the local and regional fronts. In a statement issued by the Ministry of Interior, the Minister, Sheikh Fahed Yusuf al-Sabah, stressed the importance of maintaining a high level of preparedness and strengthening joint coordination among all relevant authorities. He emphasized that the national security is a shared responsibility that requires constant vigilance and continuous efforts to protect the country and safeguard its resources. The statement further indicated that aspects of joint cooperation were reviewed, along with efforts to enhance readiness levels and improve the efficiency of field coordination among the various security and military sectors. This aims to ensure the highest level of preparedness to address any and all developments in accordance with the approved plans. The statement further added that the importance of closely monitoring developments within the region, submitting regular reports on these developments, and applying the law firmly and fairly to all without exception was emphasized. This will strengthen the state's authority and preserve security and stability. He stated that emphasis was placed on the need for full field readiness, harnessing all human and technical capabilities, and raising the level of real-time coordination between the concerned parties to ensure rapid decision-making and good management of any emergency with the highest level of discipline and professionalism. And now for further information, we have Major Sara Jamil from the General Department of Public Relations and Security Media. Hello, Major. Can you give us the latest updates on your end? How are civil defense teams managing in this crisis?
The Ministry of Interior confirms that the Civil Defense Operations Room is in a continuous session with the participation of all relevant government entities. Everyone is working in full coordination around the clock to ensure the safety of the country and its people. We reassure the public that the situation is under control and each authority is performing its role fully according to approved plans. Also, it's very important at this time not to pay attention to rumors or share or spread them on social media so that individuals do not face legal accountability. Fishing boats and boat trips must not go out to sea until further notice. Don't set up or visit desert camps. Aerial photography using drone is prohibited. And please don't pick up any objects you find on the ground, even if they seem familiar, such as pens, watches, cigarettes, cans. They may be dangerous. Report them immediately to 112. And the operation room 112 is receiving the calls 24/7 and assist the public with humanitarian and security assistance.
Thank you very much. That was Major Sara Jamil from the Public Relations and Security Media Department. We thank you for your time and your continuous efforts in protecting the nation. And now we return to our interview and conversation with Yusuf Al-Ghazala, journalist here in Kuwait. We were speaking about the build-up to attack, about the negotiations that took place a day before the attack actually happened. Can you see a similarity between what happened last year when they attacked the nuclear facilities and compared to what happened this year?
Absolutely. I mean, in both instances, the most obvious similarity is that the attacks happened during negotiations and during reported progress in the negotiations, which is, again, why we have to somewhat question the validity of intention behind the negotiations in the first place. And again, this is all speculation, so I'd like to stop it there. But there are definite parallels in that regard. Obviously, the biggest difference now is whereas last year it took the United States quite a while to enter the war in support of the Israeli occupation, who I think bit off a little more than they could chew in terms of the realization that they were running out of air defenses, they were running out of rockets for their Iron Dome. This time it's much more of a hand-in-hand operation, whereby both of them have from day one been in lockstep with one another, which is huge in terms of scale. And again, that scale is the main difference between the two. Last year lasted about 12 days, sorry. This year I believe it's going to last a little bit longer than that. Obviously, in terms of the amount of countries involved, the amount of countries being hit, and the stakes for sure are much higher as well.
Yes.
For Iran, for the Iranian government, this is a war of existence, a war of survival, which makes it a very dangerous beast. And for Netanyahu specifically, he is still facing domestic corruption charges, which have been on hold essentially since October 7th. And the Israeli occupation has been a state of perpetual conflict since then. In many Israeli circles, at the speculation of him, at the justification of him delaying those trials for as long as possible, potentially even gaining a pardon if there is a significant military victory that he can point to.
Speaking about his legal troubles in the Israeli occupation, they had their ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza. Some people believed during this moment he would be taken to court, but it seems that he continuously finds a new conflict to keep him in power. And do you believe a prolonged war works in his favor or against his favor?
I believe he thinks it works in his favor, and I think it does work in his favor in terms of perpetuating his own power. Obviously, it does come at the cost of the Israeli occupation in terms of lives, ammunition, and funds specifically, but the US will bear a lot of that burden for them. I do think that as the wars continue for longer and longer time, we will see the same effects as the American domestic scene, which is war fatigue, questions of the legitimacy of the action. Is our national security truly at this risk? Is it worth putting our lives on the line? Is it worth living under sirens? Essentially at the beck and call of one person at the top of this pyramid. There are elections slated to be held in the occupation this year. We'll see if and when those happen. We'll see how those play out as well. But the counterweights to him, the supposed counterweights to him within the political scene there are not
as strong as his.
Not just not as strong as his, but not too diversified in terms of their outlook on things. By and large, since October 7th, the lines have been very similar, and the most criticism you'll get is directed at Netanyahu personally, not in terms of the systemic issue of why are we involved in all of these wars in the Middle East? Why are we occupying the West Bank? Why are we occupying parts of Gaza? Why are we bombing indiscriminately? No, it's Netanyahu, 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 Bibi as they call him.
Now, let's take a moment to talk about the balance of powers within the region. You mentioned earlier that the Israeli occupation is a very expansionist entity in the Gulf. With the defeat of Iran or a change of regime of Iran, do you consider that perhaps the Israeli occupation will be the only sphere or the only power within the region?
I don't think so. It'll be one of the bigger ones, but you can't forget that the GCC as a bloc is quite powerful. We have tremendous leverage in terms of our natural resources, and more so, we will start to play a bigger role in tech. Where that is after this war remains to be seen, as investors might be a bit more shy to come into this region. But I think overall it will recover. I think the groundwork is solid. What we might see is also the counterweights of Egypt and Turkey. Turkey has huge regional interests here. And it's going to be very fascinating to see how this all plays out. And before, I was mentioning to you that with the demise of the rules-based world order, which is a generous term to put on the world order that we had in the past, it will be interesting to see how the spheres of influence as a concept will return. And you're kind of already seeing that right now with Turkey specifically, in terms of how they operate in northern Syria and northern Iraq, and how they might choose to operate in the future right now. For example, there's wrestling in the heart of Damascus in terms of who will have influence over Syria, which is traditionally the heart of the Levant. Egypt is always a main player. For a long time, a long part of history, they were essentially the capital of the Arab world, whether that was politically, culturally, and Saudi Arabia obviously as well, just by virtue of its size, of its stature, of its Islamic significance, is also going to be a big major regional player. And again, Iran, we don't know the future of it. We don't know if it's going to be the return of the Shah and a transition to a different form of government. We don't know if it's going to be a military dictatorship that replaces the Islamic Republic, or we don't know if it's going to be a continuation. Because if you look at Venezuela, it is essentially a continuation, but more malleable. It is just like how with the overthrow of the Shah in 1941 by the UK and the USSR, it wasn't a revolutionary overthrow. No, it was the installation of the son of the current Shah, who was more willing to play ball with the bigger powers. Just like how Maduro's vice president right now in Venezuela is more willing to play ball. And so there's a lot of different avenues.
To that point of spheres of influences, we'll return to that, but we'll just take a quick little break right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back right after this.
توجيهات مباشرة ومتابعة حثيثة ومتواصلة من قبل مجلس الوزراء ووزيرة الشؤون الاجتماعية الدكتورة أمثال الحويلة، سارعت وزارة الشؤون إلى وضع الخطط المسبقة التي تهدف من خلالها إلى المحافظة على مستويات المخزون الاستراتيجي من السلع المواد الغذائية والاستهلاكية، ولضمان سلاسة وسهولة تدفقها إلى الأسواق التعاونية. قامت وزارة الشؤون ممثلة بقطاع التعاون بتشكيل 6 فرق ميدانية بواقع فريق لكل محافظة، وذلك للمتابعة اليومية للتأكد من كفاية المخزون الاستراتيجي. إن هذا العمل هو ثمرة تنسيق وتخطيط مسبق مع جهات الدولة المختصة التي وضعت لضمان استدامة الأمن الغذائي في مختلف الأوقات، ودامت الكويت بحفظ الله ورعايته.
Ladies and gentlemen, now before we continue with our interview, we'd like to take a look at this report on the efforts of the Ministry of Public Works during this difficult circumstances facing the region. Stay tuned.
Minister of Public Works and Acting Minister of Electricity, Water and Renewable Energy, Dr. Noor Al-Mash'an, conducted an inspection visit to Doha West Power and Water Distillation Station following debris fallout from a drone interception that resulted in a limited fire in one of the fuel tanks. During the visit, she reviewed the details of the incident and the immediate technical and emergency measures taken, receiving a briefing from the station officials on the response mechanisms and activated safety plans. She praised the swift intervention of security and technical teams, which successfully contained the fire without any injuries and limited the impact to minor material damage. Dr. Al-Mash'an confirmed that both the electricity and water systems continue to operate efficiently and steadily, noting that specialized teams are carrying out ongoing inspections and technical evaluations to ensure the safety of all units and equipment and to guarantee uninterrupted service. She also affirmed the ministry's continued full readiness across all sectors in line with higher directives, emphasizing the priority placed on safety, stability, and service continuity. Earlier in the week, Minister Dr. Noura Al-Mash'an conducted an inspection visit to the National Control Center to assess the stability of the electrical grid and review its technical status following the outage of several overhead power lines caused by falling debris from the interception of drones. During her visit, Dr. Al-Mash'an received a briefing on the immediate measures taken to redistribute loads and mitigate temporary disruption to the grid. Meanwhile, Dr. Al-Mash'an commended the efficiency and rapid response of the national workforce, assuring them that the electricity and water situation is under control and that continuous monitoring is being maintained around the clock to ensure service stability.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our discussion with journalist Yusuf Abu Ghazala. Now, earlier we were speaking about spheres of influence within the region. Could you perhaps see a link between the current conflict in Russia and Ukraine and how the U.S. was seemingly reducing its support to Ukraine? One could maybe argue that it was in preparation for this coming conflict.
Definitely, that's a potential. I think the U.S. is preparing on a lot of fronts. You have to also realize that on the global political chessboard, there is Taiwan for them to worry about as well, and a lot of the assets, the military assets that the U.S. Navy has in the Arabian Gulf at this moment have come from around Taiwan.
The USS Abraham Lincoln was pulled in from that region.
Exactly. And so definitely I think the U.S. is having a lot of these in consideration when pulling back support for Ukraine. But I think also you have to think about the initial pledge that Trump got himself elected on, which was no more wars, right? We've seen how that's gone now. But back then, that was part of his agenda. And I think he has a fatigue of the Ukrainians. And I think it's a very personal level fatigue where he just simply doesn't like Zelensky all that much compared to other leaders. For example, I think he does like Putin on a personal level. I think he's a big fan of the strong man leading the nation, which is what he's trying to be as a wartime president, a constant wartime president. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. But I think in terms of spheres of influence on that point, again, that only comes with the death of the rules-based world order because that was what preceded it as well. Back then it was through empire. During the rules-based world order, it was via economic means in a lot of ways. For example, the French in West Africa. Now it's sort of going back to, again, what we talked about before, might is right. And with Ukraine, I think in 2014, when Russia was able to move into Crimea and take that without essentially too much difficulty, without too much pushback aside from sanctions, that was sort of a blood in the water for all of those people who subscribe to the idea of might is right, in terms of, wait, this is still doable. The rules of international law only go as far as someone is willing to implement them or to enforce them. And I think that's sort of planted the seeds whereby here, 12 years later, we're seeing truly the actionable plant grow up of, yes, we can do this, therefore we will.
Now, would you say historically most of the, let's say, geopolitical or international relations were based on this might equals right sort of philosophy compared to how much time it's been under this rule-based order? Yeah,
comparatively so, you could say that. I don't think it's where we need to strive to be as a species. Maybe that's a little naive, but I think as we sort of try and advance as an overarching society, we want to advance in the right way, and I think this is sort of a regression to a time whereby things were a lot bloodier and it was much more who can put their thumb on top of who. So in that way, it is a little concerning to see where things are going, but I think it is becoming policy very quickly. I mean, Pete Hegseth the other day said that good partners are capable partners, and he then proceeded to lambast the European Union for, in his words, relying on the US, leaning on the US to protect them in terms of defense, and now wagging their fingers at the actions that are going on in Iran, whereby the Israelis or the Israeli occupation were happy to strike with them. And I think that that's, again, where things are going. People are tired of rhetoric, they want to see action.
We have seen a lot of pressure from the U.S. to sort of push the European Union to increase their budget spending for NATO and all of its forces, especially with the Ukraine war. We are also seeing some reports and analysis saying that France and the UK are considering joining the fight.
Yeah, I mean, the UK definitely, I think, has a solid shot of joining in this fight, just because their air bases in Cyprus were already targeted, and they are already moving units into the area. They are already allowing potentially the US to use their air bases for defensive operations in terms of stopping the barrage that we're facing here as the Gulf states. I do think that there's potential for that in the future for sure. And on the point of the UK and France, it's interesting to see where they go and where Europe goes. Because France, for example, is actually just announced that they're going to expand their nuclear arsenal.
Correct.
As well as their nuclear umbrella to include several countries in Central Europe, all the way down to Greece. And so again, we're seeing the middle powers all uniting, just like Mark Carney said. And whether or not they join the conflict right now doesn't change the fact that everyone's kind of getting into position for this new world order.
Now, going back to that moment of spheres of influence, we know that China gets a lot of its oil from Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz is a critical juncture of oil movement in the country, in the region. Could you see a potential case where China gets more directly involved? We do know that they have offered radar and other missiles to Iran in preparation for this war.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think China has too much to gain from it. They can provide indirect support as and when it's realistic and beneficial to them. But China right now is trying to position itself as the stable trading partner, whereby the US, which is what the US used to be. The US used to be the go-to guy, more or less, for international trade, whereby China is now supplanting that. And the Donald Trump administration is making it a lot easier for them in terms of the relative chaos that we're seeing, the unpredictability that we're seeing in terms of get elected on the campaign of no more wars, and now we've seen unprecedented actions happening in Venezuela, now happening in Iran. So I don't think it's in China's best interest to get involved here. I think they're better off standing on the sidelines, letting everyone punch it out, with them being able to point to the rest of the world and say, look at them versus look at us. We're here trading, willing to develop other countries through the Belt and Road. Look at the infrastructure projects we're working on in Africa, in Asia. We are here to help. We are here to work with you. And that kind of fits into, if we want to talk about it, BRICS. Because BRICS' overall goal is supplanting the hegemony of the United States, whether via currency, whether via geopolitics. And again, if China enters this war on behalf of Iran, that's kind of a lose-lose situation for China, because they lose the stability, the air of stability, and they also enter into a conflict over Iran,
a fight that isn't necessarily their fight.
Which is not irrelevant. Iran is not irrelevant by any means. But yeah, exactly like you said, a fight that is not necessarily their fight, especially when they have Taiwan to potentially worry about.
Now, I'd just like to bring up this notion that Trump had about the great decoupling between the American and the Chinese economy. Do you see this current conflict as sort of pushing the great decoupling or postponing it, let's say?
I think it's pushing it. I think that right now what the United States is doing has really shattered existing conceptions about the world that we lived in. And a lot of people have realized that they've been living in La La Land. And now it's time to wake up and realize that if someone decides to, and you're not strong enough to stop them, then there's a lot of things that that party can get away with. And so again, I think that this decoupling is going to be completely, I'm not sure the word, completely
exacerbated.
Exacerbated because of the differences in policy that we're looking at here.
Now, about the rules-based order and how we need to see sort of cooperation among states, because if you are not strong enough to deal with it, something could happen. Do you see this as an opportunity for the GCC to really show a show of force and solidarity with each other?
Depends what you mean by show of force. If that means us striking back at Iran, I don't think that that's the wise move in terms of, first of all, it would mean a joint operation with the Israeli occupation, which I don't think is something realistic at this moment. And I think that also it's not beneficial for us to enter into an offensive phase of this war where that might invite more pressure on ourselves. I think already the Gulf states are doing a great job in terms of protecting their citizens. I think we remain looking internally, developing ourselves, making sure that our systems remain robust, finding any weaknesses, potential weaknesses, and working on those. But an offensive operation at this moment in time is unfortunately probably just going to cost us more lives.
Now, Yusuf, we'll have to take a short break and we'll continue our discussion just momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at this report before moving on to the efforts of the Ministry of Justice.
الإدارة العامة للدفاع المدني على استعداد تام وجاهزية عالية، ونعمل وفق خطط مدروسة ومحدثة باستمرار لمواجهة أي طارئ، ونتابع مع الجهات الحكومية كل ما يخص احتياجاتها لضمان استمرار نظام سير العمل وعجلة الإنتاج وسير الحياة الطبيعية، ونقول للجميع سلامتكم أولويتنا.
منظومة الاتصالات بالكويت شغالة بكفاءة عالية ولله الحمد، والهيئة العامة للاتصالات وتقنية المعلومات مستعدة لأي طارئ لا قدر الله. وفي ظل التوترات اللي تمر فيها المنطقة فعلنا خطط الطوارئ وعززنا التعاون مع الجهات المعنية عشان نضمن استقرار الخدمات الرقمية وسرعة الاستجابة لأي مستجد. الوضع تحت المتابعة وكل الجهات المختصة على أتم الجاهزية. عسى الله يحفظ الكويت وأهلها.
In response to escalating regional tensions and recent heinous attacks by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Kuwaiti officials have affirmed the country's high readiness and the activation of comprehensive security protocols to protect its sovereignty and citizens. As of early March of 2026, the official spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense stated that the Kuwaiti Air Defense Forces are effectively and efficiently engaging a number of hostile aerial targets. These targets are being detected and intercepted within the operational area in the central part of the country, reflecting the forces' full readiness to protect the nation's airspace. No casualties have been reported so far. On its part, the Kuwaiti Ministry of Interior stated that the competent security agencies represented by the criminal and security sector have identified and apprehended a number of individuals involved in committing serious violations that threaten the security and stability of the society. The ministry indicated that the arrest included a group of individuals who illegally filmed events and circulated videos, contributing to inciting chaos, misleading public information, and spreading fear among citizens and residents. The Ministry of Interior stated that the criminal security sector successfully arrested several individuals for publishing content expressing sympathy for terrorist organizations on personal accounts and social media. The ministry urged all to obtain information only from official state sources and to prioritize the national interest by refraining from sharing or posting unverified content. And to ensure citizens and residents of the state of Kuwait, the General Administration of Customs confirmed the continued smooth flow of goods entering through all land and sea ports, thanks to an integrated system that balances speed of processing with the accuracy of control procedures. Customs also confirmed the smooth entry and exit of travelers through all land ports by increasing the number of customs teams and activating field work plans to ensure the swift completion of procedures without compromising security and inspection requirements. Meanwhile, Kuwaiti Ministry of Commerce and Industry confirmed that drinking water supplies in the markets are plentiful and that the strategic reserve is sufficient. The movement of goods and vegetables is also proceeding smoothly to meet customers' needs. The ministry also noted that intensification of efforts to increase production quantities, which supports the market stability and enhances product availability. May Allah protect our dear land and its people from all harm.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Before we continue our live coverage, I would just like to repeat and reiterate that you should always take your news from reputable authorities and verified news sources. Do not take any photographs or videos of any falling debris, interceptions, or other missiles you may find. And if you are to come across any suspicious objects, please call the emergency numbers so that the authorities can handle the situation. Now, the Ministry of Justice has affirmed its continued commitment to exerting maximum effort to ensure the continuity of work and the regularity of court sessions without any disruptions in order to safeguard the rights of litigants and the stability of the judicial system. It also pledged to work diligently to overcome any obstacle that may arise given the current circumstances in the country and the region. In a press statement issued today, the ministry stated that it has taken the necessary measures to regulate work procedures and determine the ministry under the current circumstances based on decisions of the Civil Service Council and the external circular issued by the Civil Service Commission. The ministry explained that it has set the attendance rate in departments under the administrative and technical affairs sector, the judicial and legal affairs sector, the General Directorate of Execution, the General Directorate of Experts, departments under the Minister of Justice and the Undersecretary, the Kuwait Institute for Judicial and Legal Studies, and the Public Prosecutor's Office at no more than 30% of the total number of employees in each department. This percentage can be increased as needed in coordination with the Civil Service Commission. The ministry also indicated that supervisory staff have been instructed to monitor workflow daily and to organize the work schedule for court clerics to be 3 days a week. The shift system will continue in the departments where it is implemented, with the exception of the Criminal Execution Department, where evening shifts have been suspended. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our interview with Yusuf Abu Ghazala. Now, we're quickly running out of time here, so I would just like to give you an opportunity, if there are any words of reassurance, anything you think people should look out for to the audience watching tonight.
Absolutely. I'll look straight at them. I know these are scary times. I woke up last night to sirens. We've all faced windows rattling, loud bombs, but we've been through this before. We're here in solidarity with all of our allies and friends and brothers in the GCC who are facing the same aggression that we're facing. And as long as we stick together, as long as we stay calm, follow the official government programs and guidelines, we will come out of this on the other side better, stronger, and safer. I'll finish with a quick story. When yesterday had a drone intercepted above my home, there was a loud bang, and naturally I looked out the window, which I shouldn't have done, and I saw a neighbor on the roof filming. What I will say is, first of all, it's easy to think, why not film this, but the government has provided clear guidelines. Please do not film, do not take photos, and more importantly than that, for your own safety, if you hear a bang, if you see anything, please stay indoors, away from windows. We will get through this together. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. That was Yusuf Abu Ghazala, a journalist here in Kuwait, offering his insights in the history, the build-up, and the geopolitical situation the region is currently experiencing. Ladies and gentlemen, in times of regional uncertainty, the true measure of preparedness lies not only in military readiness, but in institutional coordination and civil resilience. Across Kuwait, multiple government bodies have activated precautionary frameworks designed to safeguard public health, protect market stability, secure essential supplies, and ensure continuity in education and social services. From emergency medical readiness and hospital preparedness to the monitoring of cooperative markets and the safeguarding of strategic commodities, state institutions have moved in parallel, each within its mandate to preserve stability and to reassure the public. These measures reflect a broader national strategy maintaining normalcy, preventing disruption, and ensuring that essential services remain uninterrupted despite any external pressures. While regional developments continue to evolve, the message from Kuwait's governmental institution remains consistent: vigilance, coordination, and readiness. And as the situation unfolds, authorities continue to monitor developments closely, prepared to adjust measures where necessary in order to protect both national security and daily life. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the conclusion of our special live coverage for now. Up next will be the 11 o'clock bulletin, where we'll delve into the latest updates and developments. Stay tuned, we'll be back shortly.